And thanks everybody for joining us. I'm coming to you live from the IFMA Education Center, downtown Chicago. Thanks so much for joining for what always is a expected, what is IFMA going to say about the coming year for food service and food away from home overall. Here's my agenda. I'm actually going to skip the select economic indicators. Why in the world would I be sharing economic information after we just heard from an actual economist? Because I'm not an economist. So I'm going to jump right away to methodology and assumptions. But what we're all looking forward to is the 2025 projections, and we'll actually update our 2024 forecast as well. And the last thing I'll do is I'll give you some key takeaways. There's a chat thing over there on the side. So if you want to throw in any questions, if we have time, I don't know if we're going to have time. If we do have time, I'll get to those questions as quickly as I can. I am going to go through this really quickly. So here's some really cool economic slides that talk about GDP and the unemployment rate. And it talks about the CPI, and it talks about the index of consumer sentiment. But because we just heard from an economist, we're not going to talk through those. But hey, they're going to be in the deliverables that you get. So if you need these slides for any of your presentations, feel free to steal. We are all about sharing here at IFMA. So let's jump to methodology and assumptions. We got basically a two-phase approach. Like Bridget said, we partner with a leading company called Data Central to provide us with sort of the quantitative side of the forecast. So they're pulling in publicly traded information. They're pulling in economic information. They're also doing a bunch of their own proprietary research with both food service operators and with consumers in their behavior outside of the home. So they bring us the number side of things. And then we look for the qualitative side of things, the color, the why behind the numbers. And how do we get that? Through our 5 food service leadership councils: restaurants, C&U, healthcare, B&I, and K through 12. So they sort of validate the numbers because they're the boots on the ground. So Data Central gives us the numbers, they give us the color. Combined, we feel really confident that we've got an excellent methodology that we're using to drive the forecast you're about to see. So a couple key considerations as we look at this, and before I share the numbers with you. First of all, it's I think Todd just alluded to it a little bit, and I'm sure we're seeing it a lot. There is a general consumer pullback. Have they given up entirely on food away from home occasions? Absolutely not. But they're just going out either less frequently or they're spending less when they go out. Despite the fact that unemployment remains relatively low, despite the announcement on Friday of 4.3%, we are still continuing to see labor issues across the food service landscape, and menu prices are still going up. How much more can they go up before the consumer says, I can't do it anymore? I don't know. And the good thing is that the menu prices are at least going up at a slower rate now than they used to. But in general, most of the growth that we're seeing right now is from price and less from overall growth. So when I show you the numbers, we're going to be publishing everything in real terms, meaning we are stripping out the impact of inflation on the numbers themselves. But if you are looking for where IFMA combined with Data Central is projecting inflation in the food away from home ecosystem, for 2024, we are projecting 3.8% inflation. That is actually a drop of 1.2 points from our February forecast, where we had it at 5%. So we've actually brought down our cost inflation significantly from where we were in February. For 2025 and 2026, we're pretty moderate in terms of our inflation expectations of 2%. But I know, what everybody's here for is what's going on with 2024, where do we end up? And keep in mind, as we look at this overall industry, there are 3 major segments. There's restaurants, there's the on-site world, and there's that lovely thing called retail food service. You can see the relative size of each of those. Restaurants by far the largest part, and this is operator spend. Keep that in mind as we're looking through these numbers. This is not consumer spend. This is not same-store sales. This is overall operator spend. How much are they spending when they're purchasing items? So let's get to this is the big drum roll. This is the time we've all been looking forward to. What is IFMA going to project for 2024 and what is their projection for 2025. Before I show you these numbers, our last forecast was at the end of February, and we forecast real growth for 2024 of 0.9% for 2024. And for our projection has not changed for 2024. We continue to project 0.9% real growth for 2024. Add in those 3.8 points of inflation, and you're talking about 4.7% for nominal growth. So our forecast from February remains unchanged if you don't consider our changes in our inflation assumptions. For 2025, our projection is pretty much the same. We are projecting 1 point of real growth for 2025. So my objective for the remainder of my commentary today is to sort of unpack the 0.9% and give you a sense of where the 1% is coming from. So let's jump in, and we're going to look at where does that 0.9% for 24 and that 1% compare to the previous years. As you can see, 21 and 22 were all about recovery from the pandemic. 23 was a little bit of a lag on the recovery, but we're back to where we normally are. We are not an industry that shows massive volatility. We're too big, we're too old. We grow a little bit or we go down a little bit. We are not a volatile industry. So 0.9%, while it doesn't seem like a big number, that's kind of how this industry grows. So if you are seeing massive volatility in your business, chances are it's not a reflection of the entire marketplace, because the entire marketplace, once again, too big and too mature to really show some massive volatility. So let's look at each of the segments as a whole, and I am going to unpack each of these segments individually, so I'm not going to spend much time on this, but the thing to look at here is that 0.9%, which segments are outperforming the total industry, which segments are underperforming the total industry. And in this sense, what you really get a flavor for is the fact that it's the restaurant segment that is the weaker part of the overall food away from home ecosystem. The on-site segments and the retail segments that you see at the bottom half of the slide are in general outperforming the restaurant sector overall, which is the big story I think we're really going with today in terms of how we think 2024 is going to play out. Now, if we look at 2025, not much changes in terms of our forecast. So much of the same in terms of 2025 as to what we're expecting for 2024. Naturally, this is all contingent on the general economic world that we're in being relatively same as it has been. We haven't seen dramatic changes. I know there was a massive drop in the stock market yesterday. Stock market's back up a little bit today. Knee-jerk reactions just happen here and there, but we aren't expecting massive knee-jerk reactions in terms of where the food away from home marketplace is going to go. Now, everything has been updated in IFMA scope as of this morning. I checked it. So all the new numbers are in there. Everybody who's a member of IFMA, you have access to IFMA scope. You can go in and get all these numbers, download them into Excel. It's right there on our homepage, ifmaworld.com. Feel free to grab them. So let's start with restaurants. I'm going to go through this really quickly so that we can get right back to how things were. So QSR makes up the largest part of this in terms of operator spend, not consumer spend. Casual dining is second, but however, keep in mind, our operator spend money dollars do not include alcoholic purchases. So the casual dining number is underestimated in terms of overall size. Mid-scale and fast casual are relatively the same. Fast casual has passed the mid-scale in terms of overall size. Now, if we look at the growth number for 2024, our projection back in February was 0.6%. We have devalued that a little bit, but basically no change since 2026. We're at 0.5% for 2024. So that's where we stand. Now, if we break into quick service, a lot has been said about quick service. I think there was a big negative reaction to McDonald's publishing that their same-store sales in the second quarter were down 0.7%. Keep in mind that Q2 of 2023, McDonald's same-store sales were up 10.3% US domestically. Give you a couple other numbers in terms of how some of the same-store sales here. Taco Bell's same-store sales, Q2 plus 5%, 19% unit growth for Taco Bell. Domino's plus 21% unit growth compared to a year ago. Wendy's unit count up 5%. Their same-store sales up 1.7%. On the opposite end of the ledger, Subway closed 22% of their units in the most previous year, according to IFMA scope. So we're talking about a winners-losers equation here with quick service. And that's where we see the sort of balancing out of the numbers of 0.7%. Quick service continues to be the lowest cost option for consumers wanting to dine away from home. Chains help, loyalty programs help, but it still is getting to the point where it's almost too expensive, especially when you compare it against eating in home. Let's switch to fast casual. We are more bullish about fast casual than we are about QSR. Now, once again, a lot of knee-jerk reactions to what Subway has been publishing. Their same-store sales in Q1 down 3%, down 2% in the most recent quarter. On the flip side, let's look at Chipotle, the number 2 player in fast casual. Q1 same-store sales up 7%, Q2 up 11.1%. Once again, we're talking about a winners and losers equation. We can't just look at what the big 2, McDonald's and Starbucks, are saying out there. In terms of some tailwinds, a lot of these fast casual players that were very urban focused are looking toward the suburbs for additional growth, and they're adding drive-throughs to those locations. In terms of some of the headwinds, I think the biggest headwind here is just remote working. Fast casual relied so much on that weekday business person that was working from the office, and they're no longer without that coming. That's been a major dent for fast casual, but overall for the year, we are fairly bullish on fast casual. Now, if we move over to the more full service sectors. Sorry, I'm losing my mouse here. There we go. Moving over to the full service sectors, what we find is mid-scale. And mid-scale, of course, has been declining for years on end. This is not pandemic related. This is value proposition related. They used to own breakfast. They no longer own breakfast. QSR and fast casual have entered that marketplace. So have C-stores. And in general, the overall perception of mid-scale is that it's old and it's tired and it needs a revamp. Take our IFMA's gold plate winner for 2024, First Watch, and say that's where the direction of this segment needs to go, because we as the manufacturing community, we as the supplier community, the operator community, we need breakfast. We need consumers to experience breakfast away from home. Unless we're getting that occasion, we're going to continue to see this segment decline. So many of us need this breakfast segment to really grow for us. But unfortunately, mid-scale continues to not deliver on a value proposition that consumers are especially jumping on. Now we move to casual dining. I think a lot of you would have expected us to have a negative number here for casual dining. We have brought our forecast for casual dining down compared to where we were in February. We're basically saying there's no real growth for 2024, and we don't expect very much growth in 2025. What's kind of propping up casual dining to a degree is it took them a little while, but they figured out the off-premise side of things. The whole pent-up demand thing, that's gone. So that was very 2023, 2022. And a lot of them are going to turn to dealing. It's going to be, $15.99 for an appetizer and an entree. Now, Applebee's, the number 1 player in terms of overall locations, continues to close a lot of stores. Ruby Tuesdays continues to close a lot of the stores. TGI Fridays has disappeared from the top 10 in terms of number of unit counts. So the big chains are not doing as well, but those mid-sized chains and the independents continue to do relatively well, which is surprising, I think, for a lot of people. But that is where we are standing. Now, that was the restaurant side of the world. Like I said, we are expecting the restaurant side of the world to underperform the on-site side of the world. So now the on-site side of the world, of course, is smaller in terms of overall size. But let's look at it. The cool thing about on-site is there are really no small segments. I guess you can call B&I at 5.8 billion to be a smaller segment, but they're all kind of the same size: lodging, healthcare, K through 12, C&U, and B&I. The other is made up of a compilation of vending, corrections, and military. Our overall projection for on-site is 1.9%. So remember, restaurants, 0.5%. So a significant growth difference between our on-site projections and our overall restaurant projections for the balance. No, I'm sorry, for the entirety of 2024. But let's unpack each of these segments individually. We'll start with lodging. These numbers look really positive. Obviously, they are positive. But in terms of overall dollar spend compared to 2019, lodging is still, despite all this growth we're seeing here, lodging overall spend is still below 2019. I doubt we're ever going to return to those pre-pandemic levels with this segment. The good thing about this segment is that banquets and events are back. 2023 was exceptional for that because all of those events that were sort of postponed took place in 23. A lot of them are still taking place in 2024. That's good for the F&B sector of lodging. What's bad for F&B, for the lodging sector, of course, is the advent of Airbnb, Vrbo, places like that. And also the fact that a lot of hotels are basically saying, we don't want to be in the F&B business, especially limited service hotels are saying, can somebody take breakfast away from us? We'd like you not to have breakfast here. Once again, we need breakfast as a food away from home ecosystem. It's important for our overall piece. So it'd be nice to have lodging continue to offer breakfast, at least in a limited format. Healthcare, you can talk about a steady segment. This is not a segment that is going to be impacted by recessions. You're not going to see massive growth in the healthcare sector. What is sort of holding the sector up is hospitals are full in a good way or a bad way. Patient beds are relatively full. That means there's lots of nurses, there's lots of staff, there's lots of visitors in the cafes. Business meetings are happening again at the hospital level. That means there's catering coming into those business meetings. The one thing that we have seen that's a big change from pre-pandemic levels is a lot of healthcare systems have taken their admin staff and made them remote only. So that cuts down on the number of people that are actually on staff and able to use the cafes. If we break down healthcare into its three main sectors here, we have hospitals or acute care, we have LTC or long-term care, and we have senior living. I'm going to focus on the senior living number of negative 1.3%. I think a lot of people are saying, wait a second, the boomers are reaching that age when they're going to start entering senior living facilities. And as we speak with our food service leadership councils, what we're hearing is the older boomers are starting to use it, but those younger boomers are waiting or are not going to go into senior living at all. They'd rather stay home. There's a lot of fear that came out of the pandemic of not being able to see my parents or see my grandparents if this happens again. And so I think a lot of people my age, right, who are in that sort of taking care of our parents as they age, and even now, even millennials are having to decide, do I want to have my parents go into a senior living facility or do I want to have them stay home with me? And so that's why we're not as bullish on the senior living sector as I think a lot of people would expect. So it really is the hospital part that's holding up healthcare overall. Moving on to our next sector, which moving into the education side of things, with K through 12, once again, there's not going to be massive volatility in this sector. If we are seeing the major growth vehicle right now is the community eligibility provision. If you don't know what that is, certain states are passing basically free meals for all, regardless of income level. So it used to be only those households that wanted to apply for free or reduced meals. So now states like Minnesota and California and New York are passing legislation to allow for community eligibility provision, which provides free meals for all, regardless of income levels. We're also seeing breakfast emerging as a sort of new day part within K through 12. It was always there, but it hasn't been a focus. One thing I would recommend for all of you that are members of IFMA is go check out the webinar we did with Donna Martin. She's a registered dietitian, and she lays out the specs of the new nutrition regulations that were laid out. Very plain, very easy to understand. The numbers are right there in front of you. It's at ifmaworld.com under our resources page. A great, great resource for anybody, any company that's involved in the K through 12 segment. College and university is sort of it's been growing. It's now hit a plateau. So 2024, we expect to be the final big year of growth for college university. Enrollment has reached a saturation point, to the point now where we think there's not much growth going to happen in 2025 in the college and university segment. We talked to our Food Service Leadership Council. Almost all of them are saying they're at 100%, or in certain cases, over 100% enrollment for the coming school year 24-25. At that point, the only way to grow this segment is to open more colleges and universities. And that's just not going to happen in a significant way. So we've reached a level of saturation in this segment. It's a good segment. It's still growing in 2024, but we don't expect that much growth in 2025. Finally, our last on-site segment is B&I. This one will never get back to pre-pandemic levels. The way we work has changed forever. The paradigm has shifted. Remote work is still happening. More on Mondays and Fridays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. All of our Food Service Leadership Council are reporting that their cafes are almost full those 3 days, but they're really, really dead on Mondays and Fridays. We expect that to continue. Once again, the business and industry sector is obviously at the whims of the unemployment rate. Moving on to our retail sectors, we have both supermarket and convenience stores. And we'll start with the perimeter of the grocery store. So this is not total retail. This is prepared foods within a grocery store. You get a pre-made sandwich, you get a slice of pizza, you pick up some sushi. That's all included in this. Anything from the center of the store, canned goods, all of that is not included in this. And you can tell, compared to that 0.9% for the overall food service, food away from home ecosystem, we are projecting growth of 0.9%. So right on par with the overall sector. We are projecting more growth, 1.2% for 2025 in this sector, compared to only 1% for the overall food sector. So this is not the easiest sector to get into if you are a very traditional food away from home food service manufacturer or distributor, but it is a sector you need to look at. They are using food service size packs to create some of those prepared foods. They don't want retail size packs. They want those industrial size packs that we as the food away from home community provide. Let's look also at C-stores, for example. Once again, outperforming the overall sector in 2025. We're expecting 1.5% growth in 25. We're expecting a full 1.3% growth in 2024, despite the fact that people are commuting by cars less to work than they did in a pre-pandemic world. We're just seeing so much innovation in this sector. We're seeing new food items being made available across the board, whether it be a very old traditional C-store or somebody that's a lot more innovative. Take a Buc-ee's, a Wawa, Sheetz. Those were the predecessors of it. And now everybody is playing along to catch up to be able to provide these food items that consumers are expecting. And they expect quality, they expect freshness when they go to a convenience store. That's a big, big, big change from what we've seen in the past. So if I had to sort of, sum it up in 5 key takeaways, back in February, we were very modest in terms of our projections for the year. 0.9%. That's why we're cautiously holding our projection at 0.9% for 2024. We saw the pullback that we expected to happen in 24. We saw it early on in the year, and so we built that into our projections. So that's why we don't have to modify our projections based on what's been happening in the food away from home ecosystem. The other reason that we're still positive about our overall our growth is a little bit of restaurants, but the on-site and the retail side of that pie are holding their own and keeping the overall food away from home ecosystem afloat. Despite lower than unemployment, we are going to continue to see labor be a challenge. So any labor saving solutions for operators are going to be appreciated regardless of segments, and off-premise in all its forms is here to stay. It is the new way that consumers use the food away from home ecosystem.